Okay, so this is the last feedback on the discussion boards, and our so a lot of questions about sport and politics. Um, First question from Layali: do you think sports players have helped spread the word on some important world issues, as if they had a political standing? Well, the one that I think of in respect to what happened just a couple of weeks ago when, with the death of Muhammad Ali, was his particular position, his conscientious objection to war, which I think was part of an important part in bringing people's attention to the particular situation in terms of the Vietnam War. So yeah, when some very prominent sports person takes a position, a political position like that, it can have very big consequences. Terrell says, I wonder what would take the place of sports in this country if they weren't so popular. The people seem to be enthralled in the competition, action, and lifestyle that come along with games. Yeah, and I think you have to think that it's part of being human. It's part of our need to play, to create. We think of our bodies not just as functioning in a functional way, but we create with it. We dance, we kick, we throw. Um, and so this kind of creativity gets its greatest stimulus by being in competition in terms of a sport. So I just think it's part of being human. Alex K says, since there is such a big rivalry between England and German soccer, how do you think England would be viewed on the media in Germany? I think it's probably viewed in many ways similar to the way that England is viewed, say, in Spain or France. That English soccer players have great heart, they're physical, but they don't have much in the way of skill and technique. Nick says sports are playing a larger and larger role in politics, apparently all around the world. Do you think that it's important to keep sports and politics separate, similar to the separation of church and state? Well, I don't think it really can be spoken of on the same level of church and state, which really means that you have uh, uh, a control over power which is greatly iniquitous. I don't think it's in the same league. Um, um, I, I don't. To my mind, in many ways, there's always attempts to use sport as a political tool, but I think most of the people who follow sports are pretty able to distinguish the two, and usually don't fall for that kind of a trick. Um, so maybe I'm very optimistic about that, but I think, in a sense, um, there is a certain built-in cynicism of any particular politician who's going to try and manipulate sport. What was it in the recent campaign? Um, uh, Cruz um, um, referred to was in Indiana and was talking about the basketball ring, and got a lot of kind of flack from that for not being able to actually come up with the right word to describe the hoop. Jacob, what do you think? Why do you think that politics are being pushed into sports more often nowadays? Well, I don't know if they are being pushed into sports. I think they've always been there. Um, I think one thing that has happened with politics is that it is increasingly being marketed in many different ways on a particular level. and we can see that with the rise of particular celebrity politicians. Levi says, what is your take on certain stereotypes given to Americans besides the US thinking we're more powerful, successful than others? I think most of the people who think of American athletes, especially in terms of the Olympics, think that foreigners um, think of Americans as being pampered in the sense that there's vast resources of money that is available to athletes. So it's not unsurprising that most of the world's top athletes at some stage are come to college here in the United States because they take advantage of all the great scholarships that are available. So it's partly envy and it's partly kind of an explanation to the rest of the world why Americans succeed. It's not really based upon some kind of innate skill or determination, but rather the fact that they have such fantastic facilities. Jordan, where have you seen sports and politics brought together for a good cause? Have any caused bigger problems, perhaps through their media coverage? Oh, a lot of questions there. I well, the example of Nelson Mandela and his relationship to the Springbok rugby team, and as you saw in the clip from Invictus and read that extract from that great book, um, um, shows how sport can be a healing tool of healing, of bringing people together in a very divided country. And we can see the attempts of in sport to combat racism, um, um, sexism, and other kinds of anti-gay sentiment. And I think that's been kind of positive. How effective it's been, I don't know. Do you think politicians, as Cameron, should use taxpayer dollars to build stadiums? Well, that's the American way. It's very interesting where you have the leading capitalist country really resorting to very socialist ways of I would call it socialist ways of financing sports teams. It's amazing. It seems to work, but it's kind of strange. As I said, it's a paradox in the country of capitalism to find these kinds of ways that NFL teams, baseball teams, finance their stadiums through uh, handouts from the local taxpayers. Levi, do you have any specific examples of local teams and politics that you thought were beneficial to the cause or event? Yeah, this is like a similar a question we asked before. I was thinking on a local level. There was an example a couple of years ago. Sunderland, a soccer team in the northeast of England, got a new manager, Paolo Di Canio. I think I mentioned his name before. He has fascist sympathies, and he's expressed those. He doesn't mind expressing his particular political beliefs. When he was named the manager, one of the people on the board at Sunderland resigned. He was actually a Labour politician. And eventually Paolo Di Canio left the club. He didn't manage to make them as successful as they needed to be. So, but in a sense, it's a particular stance, and I think our also fans can do that where they feel as though the particular politics of a member of their club is too extreme. Here's another question. What does it mean? Mitt Romney didn't drop the ball. Well, President Barack Obama didn't score a slam dunk. So that's a reference to that article about the use of sports metaphors in politics. And that was referring to a debate, 2012 debate between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. So it was kind of like draw. Mitt Romney didn't make any big mistakes, and Barack Obama didn't totally win the debate. Peter, are there certain parts of Italy that consistently produce more soccer talent for the national team? If so, does this change the way that other regions regard them, or does it create a sort of informal regional skill hierarchy? Wow, that's it. I can't really answer that question. That's a question for a lot of sociological research. Um, what we do know, of course, is that particular richer areas um, uh, create more sports talent because of the facilities they provide. And I alluded to that in terms of world athletics, in terms of the United States as opposed to the rest of the world. You might also think in terms of the present day U.S. men's team in soccer and the history of players who were born or grew up in Germany and were able to take advantage of all those kinds of facilities, whereas somebody growing up in Logan, Ohio, has nowhere near those kinds of facilities in terms of indoor soccer pitches, etc., coaching, etc. So yeah, there are going to be differences, and it's going to be based upon those regions that have the best facilities. Alex C., do you think that Americans pay too much attention to sports rather than other issues? Yes and no. I guess so. But as I said, I think it's sport and the attraction to sport is part of human behavior. It's part of what makes us human. So in a sense, it's hard to make a moral judgment about the attention that's given to sport. The it's just part of who we are as humans, and it may seem absurd, but that's what we accept as being human. I just wanted to mention, I didn't get to mention before, and this is going back to some previous questions, a couple of incidents that took place in the recent Euros in France. One was the connection of the far right movement in Russia being represented there by a lot of fans who were many of which were deported. They actively went out and sought to create problems to promote their particular breed of ultra nationalism. And one of those was actually arrested, and then he came back. He's the leader of the Russian fan club. And then the other incident was a protest, a weird protest towards the end of the Croatia Czech Republic game, in which Croatia's own fans actually demonstrated against their own team, and this apparently was a demonstration against the control of the Croatian Soccer Federation. And so this was a faction that was opposing those people who control it, who believe it's corrupt and run just by the few. So two interesting examples in that particular situation. Okay, thanks for all your questions, and that's the last feedback for this course. Thanks.